Welcome to the Work Camping with Why Not Wonder podcast. Today we're going to be talking about work camping contracts. We thought we would pull out all of our contracts from the jobs that we've had and actually read them and discuss what terms are in the contracts, the things that are covered, and just how important it is to look for certain things with a contract. So let's talk about this first one that we have. It's Dear Matthew and Laurie, we are happy that you will be joining our team for the upcoming season at blank. Your work camper positions will begin on this date and will end on this date. You will reach 8 hours per day, 4 days per week, for a combined total of 32 hours. You will have at least 2 consecutive days off every week to explore the area. Most cases, this will be 3 days, but there may be a case where we ask you to cover a day. Compensation includes a full hookup site with cable TV, wireless internet service, and you will be paid blank dollars per hour. We have listed here, for contract purposes, 32 hours each week, but we ask that you be flexible and cover more hours if needed at the blank per hour rate. Typical duties include cleaning cabins, cashiering, stocking shelves, taking inventory, and preparing lists for goods needed, and keeping the store clean, assisting customers, checking in and out of the campground for day use and overnight camping, computer-based registration, assisting customers, plus general administrative duties and general maintenance duties, including campsite cleanup, trash pickup, restroom maintenance, various projects as needed, assisting with special events. We value our work campers and we take our commitment to you very seriously. When you return this signed agreement, we will consider this job to be filled and will be counting on you to report as scheduled. Do not sign this agreement if you are still considering other positions. If you have reservations or questions, please contact us immediately. If you agree to all of the above, please sign below your name and date and return a copy of this letter. We accept the arrangements outlined above and agree to perform the listed duties. And then we signed.
Yep. So just to kind of summarize that lengthy contract into some bullet points, some of the key points of that were the set dates.
That was actually a short contract.
Yeah, well, it is. I just mean to summarize quickly versus reading the whole contract. So in summary, it covered the set dates. It also covered your hours. It defined the hours. 2 consecutive days off was basically guaranteed, but the goal was to give you 3 consecutive days off. And I think
that was discussed.
Yep. And we always had 3 consecutive days off. It was never 2. They also talked about total compensation, including the site info, what all was included. It spelled out the additional hours needed, possibly, but it wasn't
mandatory.
It wasn't mandatory. It was just you may be asked, and we think we were talking about this, and we think we were asked once or twice to work a couple extra hours, and they compensated us
way more
than our hourly rate. So they were very gracious. It also listed the job duties, which is really good. And then they also ask that you don't sign the contract if you're still looking for other work. And that, I think, is very important to just mention here. If you're still looking, or if you have 2 or 3 options out on the table, don't sign 2 or 3 contracts and then make a decision and pick the one you want. That's really not fair to the employer. So if you're not ready to make a commitment and sign the contract, just say something.
I think like what we did with the Colorado job that we were going to take, we needed time. We wanted to make sure that when we were signing that contract, that we were 100% committed, and that we were committed ourselves, but also to them. And she said they greatly respected that. So we kept delaying the contract because there were things we just weren't sure about. And we just asked for time and asked for clarification, and it ended up working out.
Yep. Yeah, we told them we were definitely interested in the job, but we needed to make sure before we committed to them out of respect for them.
And they appreciate that. And as long as you're not doing this a week or 2 before you're supposed to show up for the job, if you're a season ahead or 2 seasons ahead, I think it's totally okay to do.
Yep.
Here's the next one. Welcome, Matthew and Laurie. We are happy that you will be joining our team at blank resort for the upcoming season. Your work camper positions will be maintenance and activities and front desk. We have you arriving on between these dates and departing on this date. The site that we have reserved for you is level, and you will have full hookups and plenty of room to park your car. Electric will be charged at the utility company's rates to be paid through the front office on a monthly basis. All hours minus 25 hours per week for the rental of the RV site will be paid at blank per hour, and they will be scheduled on an as-needed basis. Our sites do not have cable. However, local TV channels are available. We have free Wi-Fi available in the clubhouse. You may have cable and internet hooked up at your expense through the cable company. As noted, 25 hours per week will be held. For couples, this amount will only be taken from one person for the rental value of your site and will be excluded from your gross income for federal tax purposes. We value our work campers and we take our commitment to you very seriously. When you return the signed agreement, we will consider this job to be filled and we'll be counting on you to report as scheduled. If you have any reservations or questions, please contact us immediately. The following information is included per IRS rules on lodging and compensation. In order to properly perform your duties, you are required to accept employer-provided accommodations as defined elsewhere in this agreement. The value of accommodations will not be included in your gross income. If you agree to all of the above, please sign and return a copy of this letter by email as soon as possible. And then we accept the arrangements. We accept the arrangements outlined above and agree to perform the listed duties.
Yeah, so this contract's slightly different, had a couple of the same bullet points as the first contract. So to summarize, it gave the set dates. It also talked about the site designation. They had specific sites, a specific site for us, and the cost of that site. Then they also the contract talked about the hours for the site. They actually covered that.
I think it's just important to mention because we pride ourselves on saying that we only accept jobs that are free site plus wages. So you heard in this contract that we actually took a job. This was in the very, very, very beginning that we took a job that we were so desperate to be in Florida for the winter. And so we took this job with the 25 hours per week going to our site, thinking that was our only option in Florida. It ended up not being the case. If you've seen our other video, this job ended up not working out. It was definitely for the benefit, financially, especially. But this was a case of us accepting that. If you're in the financial position to do that, absolutely go for it if that's something you're comfortable with. This was something that after this job, we knew never again. Never again. It will be free site plus wages for all of our work camping history because of essentially how much money we gave away at this job.
We did. Yeah. We gave a lot of money away, and that was part of the problem. But there were bigger issues there we won't get into on this video. They also, in this contract, covered the federal tax withholdings, which we haven't seen that yet until this contract.
Yeah, what you're referring to is the value of the accommodations will not be included in your gross income. So what happens with some work camping contracts they are very clear that they will be including your site, the cost of your site in your wages. So that will show up. I'm not sure if it necessarily shows up as income on your W-2 pay stub, but somehow it's showing up as in your gross income. And so what this contract is saying is the value of the accommodations will not be included. And that's what you want to look for.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. You don't want those included in your total income. The last thing that they covered they requested in this contract was that you don't sign the contract if you are not committed to them. So again, that's a respect thing. If you have other jobs you're looking at, just ask them, let them know you're interested, but ask them if they can give you a day or two until you can make a decision.
We will be covering in a future podcast about needing to walk away from a work camping job, but because that was this job and because we're talking about contracts, I think it's fair to talk about this in this podcast. But when we did go to resign, that was the argument of the general manager, but you signed a contract.
Right. Yep.
So it's important to talk about this. Again, we're going to cover this in a separate podcast, but yes, we did sign a contract, and then listen for a future podcast on all of that.
We'll talk more about that.
If you're like us, you might be dreaming about full-time RV life, but feeling like it could never happen for you. If you'd like to receive our 3 secrets to becoming a full-time RVer ASAP, go to whynotwonder.com/secrets and enter your email address, and we will send it right to your inbox. Okay, this next one is an actual 1099 contractor contract. So I'll be going over that, but we worked here and he was a W-2 employee. But we just realized as we were preparing for this podcast, like he didn't have an agreement, a contract with them.
No, it was just verbal. And um, we actually worked for this same campground 2 years in a row, and it was just a verbal contract.
I think at that point we were new and we had just left the other work camping job. And the way this one fell into place, the way God led us there, the relationship that we instantly had with those people, with the owner, with the office, the manager, everything. It was, I didn't even feel like we needed one. And I think that's okay if you have places like that where you just know God has you there and you're supposed to be there. That was the case for me, I think, with that place.
Yep.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think for sure. We were there for 2 seasons, so we obviously felt comfortable.
Yeah,
with that arrangement.
Okay, so this one, he worked at the gate, and again, no contract. I was actually independent contractor for cleaning. Okay, so this is a maintenance contract between this resort and Laurie. And over the years, this resort has developed an excellent reputation among campers with respect to standards of excellence, service, cleanliness of our facilities. Our standards of cleanliness are higher than the typical campground, and we will not accept mediocre or average work. The contractor has entered into this agreement with full knowledge of the high standards expected, and failure of the contractor to maintain these standards shall be cause for termination of this contract. So this was for the laundry facilities. The term was listed very clearly, commencing on these dates, ending on this date, and the contract services to be provided by the contractor. The premise shall include the interior laundry, 1 and 2, washing machines, dryers, any items of furniture, any other fixtures, equipment located in the described premises. The premises also includes the sidewalk stoop area adjacent to the entrance door. Number 2, inspection. The premises are to be inspected on a regular basis, at least twice a day, and such cleanup performed as may be required to keep the premises in a clean condition. Number 3, it shall be the responsibility of the contractor to preserve and protect the property of the resort and to report any vandalism, theft, etc. to the office as soon as the event occurs. Number 4, once a day or more frequently, the laundry room floor is to be mopped and all fixtures cleaned. This includes the tops, sides, and insides of the washing machines and dryers. Number 5, water leaks, broken machines, and any other miscellaneous repair items are to be reported to the office and a written work order request completed. The maintenance staff will make the necessary repairs as soon as it can be scheduled. Emergency repairs should be reported and taken care of immediately. Number 6, all trash containers should be emptied daily or more frequently as needed. Number 7, supplies, mops, brooms, and cleaning supplies shall be furnished by the RV resort. Number 8, the contract price for the above shall be blank per month, payable on the first day of the month for which services have been rendered. Payment for a fractional month shall be prorated on a basis of a 30-day month. Number 9, termination. Either the resort or the contractor may terminate this agreement by giving the other party 2 weeks' notice prior to the expiration of monthly term. Number 10, in the event contractor is not able to perform the above referenced services as needed, it shall be the responsibility of the contractor to make arrangements for the services to be performed by another contractor approved by the resort, and the contractor shall notify the office as to who will be performing said duties. Number 11, contractor acknowledges that contractor is not an employee of the RV resort and is not covered by workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, or other insurance of the owner. The contractor shall be responsible for obtaining any insurance that the contractor may desire or that is required by statutory regulations. Contractor agrees to hold the resort harmless and free of liability by reason of contractor's activities at the premises. This contract may be modified or extended by mutual agreement between the RV resort and the contractor. And then signatures. So I had separate contracts for the others, but it was very similar. It was just very detailed outlines of what was required in the other buildings as well.
So to summarize what was in this, basically was the set dates and the job expectations. That was the bulk of the contract. So They were pretty clear on what those expectations were, but again, they did not have any set hours. Now, we do have um, some 1099 information in our prior podcast where we talked to the tax queen, and she answered a lot of questions on what justifies a 1099 employee versus a W-2 employee. So if you missed that,
1099 contractor
that's
versus,
what I meant.
yeah.
Yep. 1099 contractor versus a W-2 employee. So if you missed that, you're going to want to listen to that podcast from last week. That was the bulk of that contract. And there's
one thing I do think is important to highlight, though, is that this is definitely something that people have come to us with questions about. In this contract, they defined that as a contractor, you are not covered by workers' comp, by unemployment insurance, or any other insurance of this resort. So definitely something to keep in mind. Some people, this is very important. I wasn't concerned. Actually, people did bring this to my attention, actually at the resort, and we're like, what if you fall? What if something hits you? Whatever, something like that. That's just not something that concerns us.
right.
We just don't hold a lot of value with workers' comp and
Yep.
that kind of thing. But I know that is a concern for a lot of people. So if that is the case and you are being faced with a 1099 contractor position, that's something to absolutely remember. You are essentially, as the tax queen told us, you are running a business as a
Yes.
1099 contractor. So you are not an employee. So you are not covered by those things. And they were very clear in defining that basically I'm responsible to insure myself if
Yep.
something happens.
Yeah. And the other thing I think this contract was very specific about that was interesting and unique is if the contractor is not able to perform the services, it's the contractor's responsibility. It would have been your responsibility to make arrangements for those cleaning or the services, as they call them, to be done.
Yeah, which I would have asked you.
Yeah, which I helped you a lot
You
anyway.
did help me a lot.
We worked together on it, but it would have been your responsibility to make sure those services were done.
Right.
Not theirs.
Yep.
It was yours.
Yeah, which is definitely interesting. That puts a lot of responsibility, especially at that resort, because it was so much work.
It was.
Yeah.
It was several bathhouses, several laundry or two laundry
Two,
facilities, halls. I mean, it was a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay, the last one we're going to cover in this podcast. Matt and Laurie, we are thrilled that you have accepted a position at blank. Your work camper position will begin on blank date until blank date. You're welcome to check into the campground as early as this date. These dates are tentative and subject to change as they depend on your availability and other returning employees. During peak season, which is this date to this date, employees will be given a set schedule and may each work 32 hours a week. At no other time during the season will employees be guaranteed 32 hours a week due to the lessened occupancy of the park. Compensation includes a full hookup site, water, sewer, and electric, plus an hourly wage per hour for each person. 30 hours must be met prior to Memorial Day weekend for lot compensation. All hours after this or above the 30 will be paid at blank per hour. Other perks consist of free Wi-Fi internet, laundry, and store discounts. Employees will be given 2 to 3 days off per week during the season. Additional time off must be requested 2 weeks prior to the date and may not always be granted. It is the understanding of the employee that he or she will receive a campsite with water, electric, and sewer. The employee will not be responsible for the cost of electricity, but we do ask that you try to be conservative in your use. For example, air conditioning. All work campers are expected to follow all of the camp rules as outlined in the seasonal policy. Visitors will not be charged unless management deems the visits to be in excess. It is required that employee maintains an employee-guest relationship at all times, especially in social situations. The following information is included per IRS rules on lodging and compensation. In order to perform your duties, you are required to accept employer-provided accommodations as defined elsewhere in this agreement. The value of the accommodations will not be included in your gross income. Your employment with this resort will be an at-will employment, at which time either the employer or the employee can terminate the relationship so long as the employer does not violate any of the laws prohibiting discrimination. We accept the arrangements outlined above and agree to perform the attached listed duties. So then you turn it over and it has a detailed list of our job responsibilities. The general duties include, but are not limited to, campsite cleanup, maintaining a litter-free park, restroom cleaning and various projects as needed, housekeeping of 18 rustic cabins, no linens, assist any department. So then on the next page, they just list the job responsibilities and they're very detailed. So general duties include, but are not limited to, campsite cleanup, maintaining a litter-free park, restroom cleaning, and various projects as needed. Housekeeping of 18 rustic cabins, no linens, assist any department with labor needs if necessary, assisting guests checking in and out of the campground for daily and overnight camping. Duties include, but are not limited to, greeting and directing arriving campers, assuring proper site setup, troubleshooting any questions or concerns of the campers, assisting guests in any requests that ensure a positive stay. Duties include, but are not limited to, maintaining the grounds and light handiwork. And then below that, there was a section for compensation. And with this location, we actually did have some special terms set up with compensation and hours and peak season and all of that. And so that's just something to remember, that you can ask for other things, ask for different agreements, add them into the contract, and as long as it's signed by both of you.
Yep. So yeah, you can definitely amend it if you need to. So to summarize, this contract basically had set dates, but it also gave you the opportunity to arrive early if you wanted to, but they specified that. They also gave their peak season times. This was a destination for a recreational destination area, and they did have peak season times. So uh, to piggyback that, they guaranteed you 30, I think the contract said 30, okay, 32 hours a week during those peak seasons, but they couldn't guarantee it outside of those peak seasons. So that's something you're going to want to look for and also discuss that with them, which is what we did. And we added that to the end of the contract.
Just because we were not able to have less hours.
Yes.
We do this to make a living, not as additional income.
Yep. Then they talked about the total compensation, including the site. And this was interesting. They talked about, or the contract mentioned, if time off is needed, that you needed to give a 2-week request in advance.
Yeah, and that's something that you bringing that up reminds me. I remember our first contract that we had, it wasn't covered in the contract. And when it came time to, like, oh, we might actually need time off, I guess it never dawned on me before we became work campers that you could actually take time off as a work camper.
Right.
And do you remember asking each other, the work campers asking each other, like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know if do we ask, are we supposed to cover each other's shifts? Like, how do we do this? So it's, I think, very, very helpful to have that in the contract, the expectations of this is what we do for time off requests.
Yep. Similar to one of the prior contracts, they talked about the value of accommodations are not included in your gross income, which again, that's very important. And it's very nice that they do that. Now, I thought it was interesting that this contract, which is the first one that has ever done this, mentions the relationship between the guest and the employee, that the employee maintains I would call it a professional relationship between you and the guests. And no other contract has talked about that, but they took that very seriously.
I think it's important, maybe not necessarily to have in contract, but to be covered in training or.
Yeah. Then they went on to talk about at-will employment in this contract, and then the job responsibilities, and they were very clear on the job responsibilities as well. And then, like you said, they gave a place to make changes or special updates, per employee at the bottom. So everybody had the opportunity to amend the contract, and as long as you had signatures from both parties, that was part of the contract.
One other thing of mention in this contract where it says the 30 hours must be met prior to Memorial Day weekend for lot compensation. So this was not a case of we were working for our site the whole season or anything like that. They explained to us, and we did actually go back to them once or twice before we even signed the contract, because at this point we're like, no, it's 100% free site. plus wages. And it's, again, we're not difficult about this. I don't want to come across that way. But again, we are very hard workers. We say this all the time, and it's not to pat ourselves on the back, but it's just the truth. We go somewhere, we commit, and we work very hard for the location. And they all see it once we get there, and they don't know that until we get there. But this was a case of us going back to them and saying, okay, but working 30 hours for our site, we'd rather not, do that. We kind of need the pay. And they explained to us that they were giving us uniforms, they were giving us actual coats that we could wear, and sweatshirts and t-shirts and all of that stuff, and that this was their way of covering those items. And then also they did special things with us, and so this was just a way to help them allocate the cost for that in addition to that. Now, I will say, before we got there, I was kind of like, seriously, about that? After working for them for a season, wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
So I think give it a chance. That's what I would say with that. So when we talk contracts, a lot of times people comment, well, what good is a contract anyway? You guys can't do anything legally. You're not going to do anything legally. They probably won't either. I think the likelihood is probably they would over us, just because I'm not willing to invest financially in something like that. But what would you say to that?
Well, in my opinion, I think it shows a level of professionalism on both ends. They are professional enough to have a contract, for one, and to present the contract. Then we have the ability to have negotiations over the contract, and then both parties can come to an agreement on that contract and then sign it. And basically, that signature is your handshake,
your level of commitment.
Yeah, it's just saying, yes, we discuss this, we come to an agreement on this. And if you ever need to take the contract to the manager or to the owner and say, look, this is what we talked about, this is what we agreed upon, you can show it to them. It's not just something that
for
was
legal.
Yeah, it's not just something for legal purposes. It's so that you can clean up any issues you might be having, if you even have them. But the other side of that, I would say, is you and I could go back to our contract and look it over and get clarification for ourselves.
Yes, very true.
Maybe we misunderstood something, or maybe we didn't remember something, and we can go back to our own contract without having to go to the management or to the owner, and we can read the contract for ourselves. It's right there in writing. So just having a verbal contract, although it's good, it's good to have the old handshake, pat on the back contract, but to have something in writing is very helpful.
Let's talk about short-term gigs and contracts. Now, for those of you who follow us closely, you know that we had a season that we were going to do fireworks with a very large fireworks company, and it ended up falling through, and we did not have a contract. Everything was verbal, and we got burned. We got burned. An entire season was essentially lost, but not really, because God provided for us in another way that we didn't know we needed. But it did burn us in that situation. But then we have other things.
Yeah, we have other jobs that are short-term gigs that we don't get contracts for, and we're okay with it. If the way I see it, if you're going to spend 4 to 5 months or maybe 6 months in a location, having a contract is much more important. If you're going to do a short-term gig that might be 4 weeks or 8 weeks and you don't necessarily have a contract, I don't get as uptight about that.
No, but having been burned the way we were.
But I still feel like even having a contract wouldn't have guaranteed anything with that job.
But my argument to that is it would have clarified. We had the question of tent or building. We had the question of location. All of those things. Yep. It was wishy-washy, and he didn't know when we called, where were you going to be again?
Yeah, he didn't know who we were, essentially.
Yeah, and we said we have a building in such and such a place, and he had no clue. So to my defense, I feel like, yes, a contract would have defined those things.
But that just tells me that even if he had a contract between us, he wasn't committed enough to even know who that contract was with.
Well, he might have been, though, had he been organized enough.
It's possible. Bottom line, I guess that is up for you to decide when it comes to short-term gig work, whether or not you think it's important to push for a contract or not. That's up to you. We don't generally.
We don't have one with the farm that you work
the farm
for,
job. This will be my 4th season. We have 0 contracts.
Most wonderful place.
Yep. So that is how we kind of manage the contract situation.
The short-term contract situation.
Yep.
But like he said, if you're picking up your entire life like we were and heading from Michigan to Montana and committing to 5 months, we never would have done that without a contract.
Right. Way too big of a commitment.
If you have any questions at all, we are always so happy to answer them in the comments below. If this was helpful to you, we definitely would love to hear that as well. Now, get out there and wander.
Thanks so much for listening to the Work Camping with Why Not Wander podcast.
You can see today's show notes at whynotwander.com/podcast. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive regular updates from us, along with special discounts at whynotwander.com/updates.